Hello everyone, and welcome back to another reading. We're here for a reading of, honestly, one of the most requested things that I read on this channel, even before it got announced to be getting a anime adaptation, which is Fate Strange Fake. Now, I've actually been avoiding as much about Fate Strange Fake as I can. I do know of a couple characters featured within, namely ones that are kind of seen in FGO, and who I know will appear in it, but otherwise I don't actually know like any of the original servants that are going to be in this. And I have been spoiled on one character making an appearance from the greater Nasuverse, which is very exciting. But otherwise, all I know is that this is a Grail War set in New York. That's it. That's all I know. I'm very excited to see what it means to be a Fate Strange Fake. And yeah, so we're going to be reading this together. For those of you who don't know how I do these readings, I read it word for word. I occasionally interject with my own thoughts and ideas, maybe jokes, because I'm that type of person. So if you're looking for a more straightforward audiobook style reading, this probably isn't what you're looking for. But otherwise, let's sit back, let's relax, let's grab ourselves a cup of coffee. I got mine right here, so that we can start reading Fate Strange Fake together. Alright, so here we go. So we got the cover here. Got Gil and Enkidu. Alright. Oh, and I got a sideways page. I can fix this. Okay. I'm gonna have to turn my own head though. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the top here. Faldius, a male mage who challenged the Magic Association and declared the start of the False Holy Grail War. He observes the progress of the False Holy Grail War from the shadows. Okay. It's a little bit almost like a Kirei. Below we got Kurooka Tsubaki, a young girl who remains continuously asleep in Snowfield Hospital. Okay. She possesses enhanced magic circuits and received command spells, even while unconscious. She continues to wander alone within a dream space created through magical energy. Interesting. Next we have question marks, a mysterious gothic Lolita girl who appeared before Police Chief Orlando. Yep, that's an American name. She seems to be knowledgeable about the system of the Holy Grail War, but her true identity is blank. Okay, below that we got Ryder, a mysterious cluster resembling black mist. Oh, and appeared within Tsubaki's dream space. He acknowledges Tsubaki as his master and wields his power in the real world in order to realize the reality that Tsubaki wishes for. Mysterious black mist. That's interesting. Okay, we have Orlando Reeve. I can't wait to get my neck back to normal. Both the police chief of Snowfield. I thought this was in New York. Is Snowfield a place in New York that I've just never heard of? I wonder. And a Magus participating in the False Holy Grail War while spreading a surveillance network throughout the city. He plans to accomplish the astounding feat of defeating heroic spirits by human hands. Oh, he's a badass. Oh, very good. Caster, the servant summoned by Police Chief Orlando. He's a woman-loving hedonist with zero fighting capability, but possesses skill to create new noble phantasms that surpass the originals. Oh my god, wait, who is that? Who's that going to be? Can create new noble phantasms. Okay. Okay. Lancer, the servant summoned by the voice of an experimental magical creature as it was fleeing. Huh? He has an elegant appearance, but he can't be distinguished between male or female, but his true identity is Enkidu, a mud puppet created by the gods, the sworn friend of Gilgamesh. Okay, so right off the start, we know that that's Enkidu. Okay, that's not being hidden from us. Interesting. Okay. Page 2. Alright, speaking of... Oh, my neck. Don't like this. Archer, the servant who possesses the strongest noble phantasm and boasts overwhelming power. His true identity is the King of Heroes Gilgamesh, the oldest hero in human history. He's participated in the 4th, 5th, and now the fake... I guess, yeah, boy, he has a good attendance record. Oh, is that a Gaelic name? We have... Tyng Chelk. Oh, God. Okay. Okay, I'm Googling this. How to pronounce tiny name name. Is it, wait, is it Italian? I don't know, actually. Maybe not. I just assumed that it was Gaelic, but it might not be. Interesting. Okay. I'm just gonna call her Tiny. With the accent, though, would it be Tiny? Or Tina? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. The daughter of a tribe native to Snowfield. Wait. Wait, hold up. Hold up. Is she Native American? Is she one of my people? Oh, frick. Nice. That's not a name at all that's similar. It looks French at that point, probably. She forms a contract with the golden servant Gilgamesh. She participates in the Holy Grail War in order to get rid of the Magi in her tribe's land. Yo, she's me. She's my people. Heck yeah. Okay, let's go up to the top for Berserker. Servants summoned using an imitation knife as a magical catalyst and formed a contract with Flat. Oh, right, I did hear Flat Escardos is in it, right. He possesses the ability to freely change his form, a power that originates from a certain popular British legend. Strange. Assassin. The zealot servant who has a mastery of 18 miracles. She was feared as a heresy, and even within the religious organization of her assassination group, she fights in the Holy Grail War in order to destroy the Holy Grail itself. Oh, strange. Who's that then? Jester Karcher. Magus, who set up a workshop in a villa located in the eastern part of Snowfield. Master Summon Assassin. And yeah, Flat Escardos from, we know him from some of the other spin-offs there, namely the El Malloy. Oh, it says right there, yeah. Flat Escardos, a student studying magecraft at the Clock Tower. He has excellent magic circuits and the talent to control and utilize them. He also a problem child who has a loose and easygoing disposition, unsuited for a magus. He studies on the legendary Clock Tower teacher, Lord El Malloy II. Oh god, my neck. I'm dying. Well, hopefully this... Okay, we're good. I can actually read normally now. So, here we go. Oh, scary dark page. Fate, Strange Fake by Ryugo Narita. Alright, so table of contents, here we go. So well, I mean, we're going to start with extra. Betrayer. I'm sorry, is that a new class? Are we just dropping in with that? Archer, Berserker, Assassin, Caster, Rider, Lancer, Observer, or Character Creation. The War Begins, Visitor, and Blank. Okay, these are interesting. Let's, I guess, get started. So, truth at times crushes the world's lies, but it cannot erase the truth that lies were there, not even with the power of the Holy Grail. Oh, are we going to be doing fake news as the main thing? Extra. Betrayer. Betrayer. A cleft. That city rising from the darkness of the surrounding hinterland was certainly worthy of being called a cleft. It was not a disjunctive barrier of the kind that might separate day from night, light from darkness. Rather, it was a harmonious barrier, one that demarcated a boundary between things of the same ilk. It was a strange thing about the city of Snowfield. Okay, so did I maybe mix up? Because I remember it being America. But did I mix up the Battle in New York event from Fate Grand Order? Is it not New York, but just a town in America? Because if so, that's interesting. It was a watershed. But the things it divided were not so different as magic and sorcery, nor were they as similar as men and beasts. In a sense, it was a hazy boundary, smudged with the colors of dawn and dusk. But it was more than just a divider. It was a black nexus, begotten from a blending of pigments. To put it differently, it was the boundary between one town and another, the boundary between man and nature, the boundary between a man and a megapolis. It was not at all unlike the distinction, that indistinct morass that separates dreams from mere sleep. The American West. The city lay a while to the north of Las Vegas. Yeah, we are definitely not near New York then. Its surroundings were a product of delicate balance. North of the city was a vast ravine reminiscent of the Grand Canyon. To the west lay a dense forest, an unusual sight in such an arid area. To the east, a tract of lakes and marshes. To the south, a vast desert unfolded. Though the city had not one smidgen of farmland, it was surrounded in all four directions by land perfectly suited for agriculture. Indeed, the city alone was a strange existence that stood out from its surroundings like a sore thumb. A boom town, with its sights set on the future. A city with just the right mixture of the natural and artificial. That was how some might describe Snowfield, dazzled by its beauty. But in reality, the city was built on arrogantly arrogant notions. Sometimes those notions were apparent, sometimes they were not. The lie of the surrounding land was as natural as it could be. It was as if that town, that cleft, that nexus, that blending of countless colors had deemed itself fit to bring concordance upon its milieu. The town became as black as a black stage, evaluating all that surrounded it. According to records pertaining to the very beginning of the 20th century, the area was home, at the time, to a few indigenous people here and there, and essentially nobody else. Starting about 70 years later, though, the area began to rapidly develop. By the time the 21st century rolled by, the land had undergone a total transformation. Now it was home to a thriving city of 800,000 people. Of course, rapid development can happen anywhere. The fact that we have been asked to investigate such a seemingly typical city indicates that we ought to devote special attention to the city's origins. Thus grumbled an elderly man clad in blue-black robes. The night sky was dark, and there was not a star in the sky. It seemed like the clouds could burst open at any time. From a sparse grove of trees at the edge of the vast forest to the west of the city, the old man peered through a pair of binoculars. As he gazed at the light thrown off by the agglomeration of skyscrapers off yonder, he went on with apparent disdain in his voice. Binoculars these days are really quite handy. They come to focus with just a push of a button, and further, it's less hassle to use them than to go to the trouble of sending out familiar. What a wretched age we live in. With a sour look on his face, the old man spoke to the young apprentice standing behind him. Don't you agree, Faldius? The man called Faldius stood beside a tree perhaps 2 meters away from the old man. His voice filled with doubt. He replied, Never mind that. More importantly, need we really be so concerned about that thing? That so-called Holy Grail War? The Holy Grail War. It was a phrase that often appeared in fairy tales and legends from times past. The moment that phrase left Faldius' lips, his teacher lowered his binoculars and spoke at him, with exhaustion apparent in his eyes. Oh no, that was Faldius who said that, never mind. Faldius, is that a joke? No, I meant, stuttered the apprentice. He lowered his gaze as if expecting a harsh punishment. The old man just shook his head and sighed, anger entering his voice. I did not think I would have to ask, but just how much do you know about the Holy Grail War? I did skim over the materials I was given, but then you know enough. Be it a mere rumor among children or the ramblings of a third-rate tabloid, as long as there is some possibility, no matter how small, that an object described as a Holy Grail will come into being, we cannot afford to ignore it. For it is the true desire of all magi, yet at the same time, a mere means to the ultimate end. And there's 2 little X's, and I wonder why. Alright, Fate Strange Fake 1. Once upon a time, there was a battle. It took place in a certain country in the Far East. The battle took place in an ordinary town unbeknownst to its people. However, that battle hid a truly dreadful secret. Indeed, it was a war that brought about a miracle called the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail. It is an eternal miracle. It is a legend. It is a relic of the world of gods. It is a terminus. It is hope. And so to seek it is to admit despair. The very identity of that object referred to as a Holy Grail changes from time to time, from place to place, and from person to person. In that war, the Holy Grail was not quite that sacred relic that it is often pictured to be. There, it was said that the miracle called the Holy Grail appeared in the form of an omnipotent wish-granting device. But it was merely said to be so, for at the time that the battle to claim the Grail began, the wish-granting device called the Holy Grail did not exist. Before the Grail itself appeared, 7 spirits were manifested. From all the world's histories, traditions, magics, and fictions from every medium, heroes were selected to be summoned into the present-day world as servants. They formed the fundament of the Holy Grail War, and were absolutely essential for the eventual summoning of the Holy Grail. Those spirits, beings immeasurably stronger than humans, were called forth to destroy one another. The Magi who summoned those heroic spirits, were known as Masters. In order to earn the right to obtain the Grail, a right which could devolve upon but one, they too slew one another. That carnage is precisely what is known as the Holy Grail War. The spirits, once slain in battle, flown into the vessel of the Holy Grail, and when that vessel was filled, the wish-granting machine was completed. That was the system underlying the Holy Grail War. Those battles were perhaps the deadliest, most noxious places in the world. The participating Magi had to conceal their existence from the rest of the world as always, and so they trode quietly through the night, letting loose the flames of the battle while unseen. Well, as good as they tried to, at least, right? As part of its mission to oversee these objects described as Holy Grails, the church dispatched its own supervisor. The noxious battlefields gleamed with a sanguine veneer as they were cleansed by these overwhelmingly powerful spirits. And now, the Holy Grail War, a battle fought 5 times on an island in the Far East. Something appeared in an ordinary town in the States. That something was accompanied by harbingers akin to those seen in the war fought in the Far East. Rumors of that something spread among Magi. As a result, the Association, the organization which brings all Magi together, saw fit to conduct a secret investigation of that town. And so it came to pass that an elderly mage and his disciple were dispatched. Very well. Your knowledge of the Holy Grail War is sufficient. However, Faldius, I am unimpressed by your lackadaisical attitude. It disappoints me that you know so much about it, yet care so little. Depending on how things turn out, this could be a matter that concerns the entire association. Were that to happen, those wretches from the church would surely turn up. Get together, Faldius. But is this really the place? Replied Faldius, skeptical despite his teacher's admonitions. The system underlying the Holy Grail War was built by the Einspurns and the Makiri. Is it not tied to the land that the Tosaka preferred? Could someone really have replicated their system a full 7 decades ago? If this is indeed the place, yes. In the worst case scenario, it is possible that this place was built solely for the sake of the Holy Grail War. It couldn't be. Calm yourself, that is just one possibility. It is said, after all, that the 3 founding families did anything and everything to obtain the Grail. In any case, we have yet to learn who is attempting to recreate this Holy Grail War in this town, Faldius. It would not surprise me if the perpetrator was some relation of the Einspurns or of the Makiri, one of the Tosakas at the clock tower, so I doubt it is their handiwork. Okay, so Rin is at the clock tower right now. Okay, good to know. The old mage returned to his binoculars, leaving open the possibility of the founding families being involved. It was perhaps an hour till midnight, yet the city lights were almost as bright as ever. Snowfield stood serenely against the overcast night sky, boasting of its own existence. After surveying the area for a few minutes, the old mage prepared to cast a spell, as if the only reasonable thing to be done. The spell would render his binoculars capable of viewing the ebb and flow of ley lines. The apprentice gazed upon his master from behind and meekly asked, "If a Holy Grail War truly does take place, surely neither we of this association nor the devotees of the church would keep quiet about it." Indeed, but there have only been omens thus far. Back at the clock tower, Lord Elmalot. Why did I want to vomit when I said his name? I love that. I love Waver. Why would I do that? In fact, all it was is I just had something in my throat. But it was really... Need a sippy of my coffee. It is really funny that as soon as I said his name, my throat's like, stop that. Maybe I was thinking of Archibald. No, we know at this time, this is our good boy Waver, so it's fine. Anyways, Lord Elmalloy said that there were irregularities in the ley lines. Well, That was just a crude hypothesis on his part, to say nothing of that student of his. Probably flat in this case. However, we are now here in this land in order to verify El Malloy's predictions. Exhausted, the old mage chuckled. With a mixture of irritation and scorn permeating his voice, he talked and talked at a great length, perhaps at his disciple or perhaps at himself. Of course, no heroic spirit can be summoned unless the preparations for a Holy Grail have already been made. If a heroic spirit is indeed brought forth, our doubts will immediately be cast away. But I'd prefer for that not to happen. It's a surprise to hear that coming from you, sir. Speaking for myself, I very much hope that the rumors surrounding this land are nothing but. And if something does materialize here, I would like for it to be a fake Holy Grail. Does that not contradict what you were saying earlier? That the Holy Grail is a true desire of all magi and a means to an ultimate end? Well, I suppose it does, he replied, furrowing his brow. But even if, hypothetically speaking, there is something here worthy of being called a true Holy Grail, I say confound that. It would pain me to see the Grail appear in a country with such a meager history. I'm sure that many magi would do anything to reach the root, but to be frank, I would not. If I were to reach the root, it would be like an ill-mannered youngling muddying up my bedchamber with his unkempt shoes. Well, that wouldn't do it for me. He shook his head exasperatedly. Is that so? For the umpteenth time that day, the old mage sighed at his apprentice. In any case, he wondered out loud, changing the topic of conversation, in this new land, I have to wonder, just what manner of servants could be summoned? Indeed, leaving assassin aside, the identities of the other 5 classes depend upon their summoners, so we truly have no way of even predicting what might happen. Okay, so this is still going off the system of the assassin has to be Hassan? Okay. Unable to contain his aggravation with Faldius, the mage harshly rebuked him. If you leave assassin aside, there are 6 classes remaining, you clod. It was not 2 minutes ago that I spoke of the 7 servants. Enough with your tomfoolery. Why did he forget one? Each heroic spirit summoned to the Holy Grail is placed in one of the 7 classes. Saber, Archer, Lancer, Rider, Caster, Assassin, Berserker. The heroic spirits are summoned in forms that accord with their various special characteristics, thereby honing their abilities even further. A hero of the sword may be summoned as a saber. A hero skilled with the spear summoned as a lancer. To reveal one's true name is tantamount to broadcasting one's weaknesses and special abilities. As such, servants are typically referred to by their class names. Each class is also endowed with various skills, each able to influence combat in its own distinct way. For example, Caster has the power of the bounded field creation, while Assassin has the ability of presence concealment. Incest... That almost sounds like I said incest. Wow, we are really getting onto the Nasuverse train, huh? Oh boy. In a sense, the various classes are like chess pieces, each with a distinct ability. But each player only has one piece. The chessboard is irregular, designed for a battle royale. This is so funny because there is the Fate Stay Night board game, which I really wanted to play. But every time I got the English language instructions, it was like almost impossible to read. It was real tough. Let's see here. The chessboard is irregular, designed for a battle royale, and every piece has a chance to control the board, provided that its mover, its master, is strong enough. It was this most fundamental principle of the Holy Grail War that Faldius had bungled. Bungled is a good word. His teacher had lamented that he had such an unworthy disciple, but Faldius remained emotionless, despite having been scolded. He hadn't turned a deaf ear to his teacher's words, nor did it seem like he was reflecting on his indiscretions. What? No, there are 6 classes in total, Mr. Rongal. Rongal. Okay. He said in a soft and steady voice. What? Suddenly, a chill ran up the spine of the old mage Rongal. Okay, that's the mage's name. This was the first time Faldius had referred to him by his name. He wanted to yell at Faldius, to ask him what was going through his head, but Faldius's icy glare stopped him. Rongal remained silent. Faldius's emotionless visage twitched. In the Holy Grail War waged in Japan, there certainly were 7 classes, he said, coolly pointing out his teacher's mistake. But in this city, there are only 6. The Saber class, the strongest and most suited for battle, does not exist in this false Holy Grail War. What interesting. What are you talking about? Something crunched in his backbone. His magic circuits, his nerves, and his blood vessels all conveyed a warning sign, causing an alarm bell to ring in his ears. The apprentice, or at least the man who must have been his apprentice until a few minutes ago, took a step towards him. The system created by the Makiri, Einsburns, and Tosaka was truly amazing, he said in a voice bereft of emotion. That's why we couldn't copy it perfectly. Oh. We would have liked to begin the war with an exact copy, but when we used the Third Holy Grail War as our template, and that was a real mess of its own, you see. It really is a shame. Faldius clearly looked like he couldn't be past his mid-20s, and yet was narrating events from over 70 years ago as if he had just seen him himself. Oh my god, is this what I think it is? No. No, he's not back, is he? Oh no. Just when it seemed like his expression was going to turn more sinister, the corners of his lips contorted as if pulled by invisible strings. Still as cool as ever, he spoke from the bottom of his heart. You referred to my nation? Oh, never mind. You referred to my nation as young, but that is all the more reason for you to remember, Elder. What? That you ought not to make light of a young nation. Crunch, crunch, crick, crick, creak, 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 crunch. Every last one of Rongel's bones and muscles creaked. Perhaps it was because he was tightening his guard, or perhaps he was just outraged. You wretch, who are you? I'm Faldius, old chum. Of course, the only thing you know about me is my name. Anyway, I have to turn off Hoot House so badly. I apologize. Anyway, I really have learned quite a bit about the association up until now. I suppose I ought to thank you for that. Based on his extensive experience as a mage, Rongel knew right away that the man standing before him was no longer his apprentice. Rather, he was an enemy. Rongel readied himself to kill Faldius the instant that longtime acquaintance of his made a move. And yet, alarm bells continued to ring through his head. He must have known precisely how capable a mage Faldius was. There were no signs that Faldius had been concealing his strength. As an experienced spy for the Association, he could be sure of that. At the same time, his experience as a spy made it clear to him that he was in a dangerous situation. You must be a plant, then, from another organization sent to infiltrate the Association. And you have been one ever since you told me you sought to become a mage. Another organization, eh? With a gluey, syrupy voice, Faldius corrected Rongel. Their association seems to be under the impression that a group of non-association heterodox mages is responsible for the creation of this Holy Grail War, but, I mean, honestly, how could... Well, never mind. Oh my goodness, wait, who... I have an idea on who this could be, but we're gonna have to see. As if to indicate that there was nothing more to be said, Faldius took a step forward. He wasn't particularly menacing, nor did he present himself as an enemy, but it was nonetheless clear that he was plotting something. Rongel clenched his teeth and smoothly lowered his center of gravity, preparing himself to respond to whatever Faldius might do. Do not underestimate me, child. As he spoke, he readied a plan to make the first move in this duel of magi, but he had already lost. By the time they had begun trying to outwit one another as magi, Rongel had already been defeated by the man standing before him. I'm not underestimating you, sir. For Faldius had not planned to fight him as a mage in the first place. I'll hit you with everything I've got. Faldius ignited the lighter that he was holding in his hand. A cigar suddenly appeared in his other hand, which was empty until then. It looked like a portation. apportation? Yeah, that's okay. Not teleportation, but okay. But there were no signs that he'd used any magical energy. Seeing that, Rongol was puzzled by his actions. He grinned. It was a grin from the very core of his being, a smile of a sort that Rongol had never seen. He went on saying, "That was just an illusion, a trick, not magic." "Ah, well, you see, we aren't really an association of magi specifically. I hope you aren't too disappointed," said Faldius, without even the slightest bit of tension in his voice. He lit his cigar. "We answer to the United States of America. It just so happens we have a few magi among our numbers, that's all." Rongol was silent for a few moments and replied, "I see. Now pray tell, what does that cigar have to do with everything you've got?" Rongol was trying to buy some time to ready his magic, but the moment he spoke those words, something burst through the side of his head. Everything was decided in an instant. It was a wet and blubbery-sounding explosion. The bullet decelerated as it pierced his cranium, lead scattered everywhere, swimming in a sea of brain fluid as it burned his mind away. Instead of exiting through the other side of his skull, the bullet ricocheted around his brain pan, putting an instantaneous and permanent end to the old man. And then, even though he was quite apparently dead, dozens more bullets pierced his body as if to deliver a final blow. The bullets were not fired from one place. There could have been more than a dozen marksmen situated at various locations. Must have been, even. That was clearly overkill. What an inexorable way to destroy. His aged limbs bent and crumpled powerlessly like a marionette forced to dance to rap music. That is a strong look. Thanks for the dance, that was pretty funny. Rongol's body sent up a red splay as it slumped to the ground, squelching. Faldius looked at the fresh corpse and clapped. "You look 30 years younger now, Mr. Rongol." A few minutes later, Faldius stood before the body of his teacher, collapsed in a pool of its own blood. But the forest around him had changed. There was a strange atmosphere around him. Dozens of men clad in camouflage gear moved out of the forest from behind Faldius. Each one of them wore a black balaclava and held a silencer-equipped assault pistol, each engraved with a different design. Rustic, yet detailed. The races were scarcely discernible, never mind their emotional effects. One of them straightened up and walked up to Faldius, delivering a salute as he spoke.
"Reporting in, sir. Situation is normal. We found nothing out of the ordinary."
"Good work, buddy." Replied Faldius. Or as his underling spoke quite formally, Faldius's voice was warm. Oh no, that was okay. Interesting. He ambled over to the corpse of the old mage, looking down at it with a weak grin on his face. Still facing away from his subordinates, he said, "Well then, seeing as how many of you are probably unfamiliar with these so-called magi, let me give you the rundown." The uniformed men had fallen into formation behind him. In silence, they listened to Faldius speak. "The mage is not a sorcerer. Don't clutter your imaginations with fairy tale creatures and legendary beasts. Think of it as, that's it. Think more along the lines of a Japanese anime or a Hollywood flick. That's all there is to them." Oh, it's okay. I really appreciate when you have characters that are like, just think of it like an anime. And like, when this was written, I feel like you'd have people go like, a what? But like, if we're talking like now, people, like the average person be like, okay,
"Yes, sir. Understand."
He squatted down before the body of what was once his teacher, grabbed a piece of it, and lifted it into the air with his bare hands. It was a bizarre sight, but nobody so much as raised an eyebrow. Oh my god, really? They die when they're killed. You had to put it in once, huh? You legally had to do it once. They die when they're killed, and physical attacks are reasonably effective against them. Now there are some who cover themselves with a veil of mercury, strong enough to deflect thousands of bullets. There are those who transfer their consciousness and extend their lives with the aids of insects embedded in their bodies. Wow, yeah, no, we are going through all of them, huh? But, well, the former has no defense against an anti-tank rifle, while the latter almost certainly couldn't survive a precision missile strike. They may well have figured that Faldius was joking. The camouflaged men struggled to suppress their sniggering. But the moment they heard the next thing Faldius had to say, they fell silent. There are exceptions, though. For example, this fellow, who wasn't even here in the first place. Oh?
Could I ask you to elaborate on that, Mr. Faldius?
Inquired one of the gunmen, ever so formally. Faldius cackled and tossed a piece of the corpse's flesh at him. He caught it staidly. He looked at the piece of meat, likely part of a finger, and gasped with surprise. What? Under the illumination of his flashlight, it was clear that the white bone protruded from the red sinews of the flesh, but something was wrong. Something unlike the flesh of a human. Transparent threads, not entirely unlike fiber optic cables, extended out of the flesh and wormily wiggled about in a most disturbing fashion. A cyborg, so to speak? Well, we call it a puppet. Mr. Rongel is a terribly cautious investigator, you see. He's not so foolish as to come all the way out here with his real body. At this moment, he's probably situated at either in one of the branch offices of the association or in his own atelier. Do I say that right? Atelier? I call it atelier. I bet he's all in a tizzy now.
A puppet? Well, that's preposterous.
It is something of a spectacular technique, but do notice that he wasn't able to make it seem perfectly human. The form of an old man works well for concealing those imperfections, I suppose. Oh my god. I hear there's a puppetress whose dolls are utterly indistinguishable from the bodies they're modeled on. They'd even passed a DNA test. That's my girl! Faldius talked and talked, sounding disinterested as if he were an uninvolved third party. The soldier frowned.
In that case, would he have not heard everything you said earlier?
He asked of Faldius, his commanding officer. He would have, just as planned. I went to the trouble of gloating like a fool prior to killing him precisely in order to ensure that the association would come to know of everything that I said. Faldius stood atop the fake body lying in a pool of fake blood, and gazed up to the dark skies began to drizzle. Contentedly he murmured, "Consider this a declaration, our warning to the Magi." And that marked the beginning of the banquet of men in heroic spirits, the beginning of the false Holy Grail War. Prologue 1. Archer. Okay. Here we go. Prologue 1. Archer. He was truly a mage in every respect, yet at the same time, he had stagnated in every respect. The false Holy Grail War. He knew it was an imitation of the ritual once carried out on an island in the Far East. That did not bother him. It matters not. Perhaps it is a sham or a counterfeit. Even if it is, though, it does not matter. As long as it yields the same results as the original, it will suffice. No proud mage would rely on the fruits of another's labors. Such a mage would choose instead to construct a system of her own, just as the three founding families created the Holy Grail War. He, however, was quick to follow in the footsteps of others. To lead or to follow, both options were reasonable, in a sense. From the very beginning of this mere imitation of the Holy Grail War, there were none as determined in every respect as he, none as enthusiastic than he. From the very beginning, he was prepared for anything that might happen when he came to Snowfield. When he first heard the rumors, he laughed them off as mere gossip. Then a report issued by Rongul sent tremors through the association. News spread from mage to mage until it reached him. He was from a family of not insignificant repute among Magi, but his lineage's power was on the decline. As the head of the family, he was under pressure. He had formulated his fair share of magical theories in his time. He was an intelligent man. He knew quite a few techniques. All he lacked was raw power, the sort that could have been built up over many generations. This drove him to ever greater frustration. The standard thing to do in this situation would be to spend many years researching ways to increase his family's power, pass on that knowledge along with the magic crest to a sufficiently able descendant. but he was in a hurry. His son was even less capable of magic than he was. There were many families whose magical natures grew weaker and weaker over time until they completely lost touch with the world of magic. This was no laughing matter. I will not allow myself to fall like the Makiri. Like any other organization or corporation, the association is rife with obstacles. Only a mage of a powerful bloodline could come to possess a method for producing powerful, thriving successors. It was a catch-22. He was a mage in every respect, and yet it wasn't enough. He bet everything on the perhaps fake Holy Grail War, came to Snowfield, put all his chips on the table. All his assets, his whole past, even his future. I have nothing to fear. Everything will go smoothly. So, as to demonstrate his resolve, he extirpated his son who had no future. He did the same to his wife, who tried to stop him. He felt nothing for her, a woman who could not bear him thriving offspring. That is a very mage sentence. Even so, he found it shocking that she understood nothing of what it meant to have self-respect as a mage. It must have been her fault that his son was lacking. Alas, she was the best woman he could obtain with his current rank. In order to move up in the world, he had to win this war. Even if this Holy Grail War was counterfeit, the mere act of winning a so-called Holy Grail War would suffice to improve his standing as a mage. He'd even find a path to the root by winning this war. Or perhaps he could learn the secrets of the Makiri and the Ainsburns. No matter what, he was bound to be in a better position by the end of this war. What a splendid gamble that was. At the very least, he would reap a reward more valuable than all the things he risked entering the war. He thought about all the various ways he could benefit from this war, but not once did he consider the possibility of his defeat and the ensuing end of his lineage. There was a good reason he didn't consider the possibility. He had a solid chance to win. Or at least he had a good enough chance to justify having done away with his son. So, these are the command spells, I take it. They were a little different from what he had expected. Even so, he gazed at his right hand. A loving smile struck to his face as if he were gazing upon his newborn child. The seals took the form of a loop of a chain and served as proof that he had been selected as a master in this Holy Grail War. But if these have appeared, then the Grail has recognized me. Me, as a master. As the one who shall take control, or the one who shall control that heroic spirit. As he spoke, the man glanced at the cloth parcel beside him, and then he laughed. He laughed, he laughed, he laughed. A grand ravine north of Snowfield. In a mountain chain near the ruddy cliff face, there was a system of caves. Though the caves were originally formed by natural processes, they now served as the mage's atelier. He had established a bounded field to prevent others from approaching. A lamp lit the space around the mage. He picked up the parcel and carefully and respectfully removed an object from it. It was a key. It would not, however, be appropriate to describe it as a mere key. It was exceedingly ornate, and about the length and weight of a small survival knife. It seemed to him that the jewels that ornamented it were extremely valuable, both magically and monetarily. I've heard tell that it was summoned in a previous Holy Grail War using a fossilized snake. And, using this relic, there's no doubt I shall summon it. Okay, so the fossilized snake would be Gilgamesh, right? Because that was a snake that ate the thing, right? Once upon a time, when his family was still powerful, one of his ancestors waged everything, much like he had just done to obtain that key. What his ancestors sought was the treasury of the Golden City, which was said to house all the things that exist in the world. The key was a device that would open the gates deep within the City of Legend. He had no interest in material wealth. A treasury enshrining every possible magical artifact, however, was something he could not overlook. When all was said and done, the ancestor managed to verify that the key was genuine but made no further progress. He never found the treasury itself. The key was impregnated with some magical energy of unknown origin, but that did not matter to the mage at this point. It was a relic belonging to the heroic spirit he desired. The key would serve as a superlative catalyst, all but ensuring he would attain the servant he sought. The time had come. Let us begin. The mage stood up and his smile vanished abruptly. He set aside his emotions and his selfish desires, focusing all his attention on the ceremony he had to conduct. He unified his senses, focusing them to a point and sealing off those which were unnecessary. His nerves, his blood vessels, and the invisible magic circuits that ran throughout his body. He felt a hot liquid racing through those pathways and... The mage spoke, a summoning invocation, both a felicitation of himself and a malediction against the universe. A few minutes later, he lost his life and everything he had sacrificed for this war. The lineage of magi to which he belonged had met its end. It all happened in a split second. A mere split second. Following a battle of mere seconds, he met his end. Just like that. Huh? I did it. I did it! When the mage saw it before him, he could not remain silent. There was no need for him to ascertain the being's true name. From the very beginning, he knew what he would summon. He just barely managed to suppress a roar of joyous laughter. For a few seconds, he stood there, ignoring the heroic spirit. The heroic spirit's countenance was tinged with a clear and obvious displeasure. Nonetheless, carried out his duty as a heroic spirit. Of course, there's no telling whether or not he conceived of it as duty in the first place. Answer me. Are you the insolent mage that dares make an entreaty to a king in all his radiance? He had golden hair and golden armor. As a servant, he was defined by his unparalleled magnificence. His query to the mage was laced with contempt. The mage was dismayed when he heard the servant's question. Even though he could sense overwhelming power of the being before him, he felt a twinge of anger. How dare a mere servant be so impertinent? His pride as a mage won over his trepidation. However, an ache in the command spells on his right hand brought him back from the brink of rage. So be it. Given this hero's personality, I should expect as much. Right at the outset, he would have to make the relationship clear. In this war, he would be in charge. The heroic spirit he summoned as a servant was merely a tool of his. Yes, it is so. I am your master. He prepared to complete his response to the servant's query, extending his right hand forward to display his command seals, wherein he realized that his right hand had gone missing. Huh? What? He was at a loss for words. His stammers echoed throughout the cavern. Though not a blop of drub? Love spoonerisms. Though not a drop of blood had fallen from his body, his right hand was clearly gone. Panicked, he lifted his wrist up to his face. The sharp odor of burnt flesh filled his nasal cavity. Faint wisps of smoke were rising from the stump of his wrist. Clearly, his hand had been cut off with some sort of flame. The moment he became consciously aware of that, a surge of pain shot through his nervous system and... I'm gonna take this scream break to take a sip of my coffee. A scream, an overpowering scream. He shrieked at the top of his lungs, sounding like some kind of enormous insect. Noticing this, the heroic spirit's sounding board said, "So you are a jester, knave? If that be so, amuse me with more elegant screams. This will not suffice." The servant didn't even lift an eyebrow, prideful as always. It would seem that he was not responsible for the disappearance of the mage's right hand. In the face of this incomprehensible happening, the mage was about to lose control of himself, but as a mage, he could not allow that to happen. He forced himself to calm down and quickly compose himself. There is someone within the bounded field. How could I allow this to happen? How injudicious of me. Under normal circumstances, he could have sensed any intruder the moment they entered these caves, since he had made them into his atelier. However, he had his guard down while he was focusing on the summoning of the servant. The intruder could have snuck in unnoticed, while the caves brimmed with the heroic spirit's magical energy. Even so, there were other traps set up to support the bounded field. None of the traps had been activated. If the intruder had managed to deactivate every trap that stood in their way, the mage would have been quite cautious in dealing with them. That much was clear to him. As he magically reconstituted what remained of his right hand, he faced towards the presence he now sensed, towards the tunnel that led out of the cave, and bellowed, "Who are you? How did you get past my bounded field?" And then a response came right away, sounding forth from the darkness of the cave. However, the response was not to the mage, but rather to the golden servant. "Almighty King, your humble servant begs permission to present herself before you." The servant thought for a second, then replied haughtily, "Very well. I shall grant you leave to witness my glory." "I am most grateful for this privilege, your majesty." Her voice was clear, immaculate even. It was devoid of emotion, as it rejected all that was. She emerged from the shadow of a boulder. Though her voice alone left the impression that she was young, she was even younger than her voice suggested, perhaps 12 years old. Her skin was dark brown and her hair lustrous black. Clad in the elegant beauty of her ceremonial garment, decorous in every way, she was a child of noble upbringing. No, shut up, what is this word? Though her face No, shut up, that's not a word. Sorry. You can't... That's not a word. What? Okay. Pulchritudinous. What the frick is this word? Pulchritudinous. Okay. I see someone had a bet to use that word once in their lifetime. Though her face was pulchritudinous, which means beautiful, accentuated further by her dress, the expression she bore was somewhat less resplendent. She humbly took a step into the atelier and bowed deeply before the altar atop with which the heroic spirit stood. Then, unconcerned about the dirt on the ground, she fell to her knees. "What?" The mage choked back a cry of rage. Unable even to discern how strong the girl was, he could not afford to act rashly. Meanwhile, the girl paid the mage no heed. The heroic spirit was unsurprised by the girl's deferential posture. He looked down at her and spoke with great power underlying each word. "You have done well not to spill the blood of a mongrel in my presence. However, the air is now filled with the most indelectable stench of flesh. If you wish to render unto me an explanation for this indiscretion, do so now." The girl briefly glanced at the mage. "I beg your forgiveness, your majesty. I thought it fitting to render retribution unto that thief for having stolen the key to your treasury, as he was unworthy of facing justice at your hands." "Oh, she knows every right word to say," she replied, still kneeling. As she spoke, she brought forth a piece of human flesh. It had for sure been a part of the mage's body, and it was magically connected to the heroic spirit by virtue of the command spells inscribed upon it. In other words, it was the mage's right hand. The golden heroic spirit nodded at the girl's response. He looked down and saw the key, placed on a pedestal by his feet. He picked it up, and then tossed it away disinterestedly. "This key is a trifle. There lives not a single man in the entirety of my garden who would dare lay a hand upon my treasures. Though I did order that this key be created, I did not need it, and so I did away with it." The mage had been speaking an incantation to numb the pain in his right wrist. When he heard the heroic spirit's statement, he was shocked. One of his ancestors had staked everything on the hopes of obtaining the key to that treasury. That artifact, his family's one and only pride, had been tossed away like a piece of filth. And that, too, by his servant, a being who should have been his slave, his tool. Oh my god, Hu Tao. Why are you... Hu Tao, I'm gonna... What is this? Oh, I got a match and Cuddly Forest Creatures is coming out for Nintendo Switch? Shut up, quiet. I hate that. I mean, I love my cell phone, but I hate it. Anyways, and by his servant, a being who should have been his slave, his tool. Overcome with rage, the pain in his right arm grew dull. even as he stopped chanting the incantation. However, as if to deliver a fatal wound to the mage, the brown-skinned girl turned to look at him and spoke to him in an intimidating voice. If His Majesty wishes that it be so, I shall do no further battle with you. I ask that you depart now. Her voice was dripped with pathos. What? If you do so, I will not have to slay you. The mage lost control of himself. The fury that welled up within him took control of his magic circuits. He did not even have the capacity to speak. Hysterically, he released all the magical energy stored in his left hand. He put all of his magic, his madness, in his might, into a spear of black light and flung it at the girl with all his strength. It soared towards her, tearing through space, ready to consume her whole. It blitzed, it surged, it raced. The girl should have been destroyed by his burst of magical energy before she could take another breath. But that didn't happen. A silent chant. As her lips moved, magic began to take form around her. Almost immediately, immense magical energy erupted between her and the mage. It was like a spell that had been compressed so far that it became soundless, a chant of overwhelming power. And at the very end, the mage saw it. An enormous fiery maw, perhaps twice as tall as him, appeared in front of her and drank down the magical energy he had released, and then... That cannot be. That was the last thing he ever thought. In the end, what was it that could not be? He did not even have time to contemplate. That can't be. As a mage, he would have liked to think that if he were to die, his lineage would live on, but even then, it was a mere few days prior. He recalled that it was a mere few days prior that he had slain his would-be successor with his own hands. It can't be. It cannot. I will die here. That cannot. And then, the mage vanished. He lost his life and everything he had sacrificed for this war. The lineage of Magi to which he belonged had met its end. It all happened in a split second. A mere split second. Following a battle of a mere few seconds, he was swallowed up by those flames. He met his end, just like that. I beg your forgiveness for having subjected you to such an unseemly sight, your majesty. She had just killed a man, but she was not flustered. She bowed her head before the heroic spirit. The golden servant looked upon her, as if to say that it did not matter to him. Then, in reference to the magic the girl had used, he said, I see. So your people have ruled this land in my absence. The magic she had just used did not originate within herself. Rather, it was likely she had exploited the ley lines of this land. In acknowledgement of that fact, emotion flitted across the girl's face for the first time. Her head still bowed low, she wistfully replied, We have not ruled it. Rather, we have lived in harmony with it. Just as your majesty surmised, my people are but mere commoners once outside Snowfield. A mongrel shall never be anything but a mongrel. Those with magic are no different than those without. His arrogance suggested that he believed all things save for himself to be alike. The girl did not reply. The command spells that had been on the mage's right hand had already migrated to her own right hand. Magical energy now flowed into the heroic spirit's being, not from the mage, but from the girl. As he observed this, he spoke as imposingly as ever, somehow bored, but at the same time infinitely majestic. Very well. Once again, answer me. Are you the insolent mage that dares make an entreaty to a king in all his radiance? The golden heroic spirit, the greatest of all heroes, the man said to be the king of all kings. The girl gave a firm nod and bowed down before him once again. I do not seek the Holy Grail, said the girl quietly as they made their way out of the cave. She had identified herself to be Tinny. Okay, you know what? Let's get what the wiki says for it. Okay. Tine Cheruku. Is that correct? How would I pronounce her name? Tine Cheruku. Tine, because in Japanese it would be okay. So I'm gonna pop it into Google Translate to tell me. So because then if I can get the Google Translate, I'll at least know what I need to do for it. So let's pop it in. So then translation. Okay, that's the wrong one. Don't worry, I'm solving this. Because I'm throwing it into... I thought I copied the pronunciation, but I didn't. Oh, this is embarrassing. Okay. So I'm going to go to translate. Because in Japanese, her name is... Okay. Can you act... Okay. No, stop. Okay. Tine. Okay, Tine. It is Tine. Okay. Tine. Got it. Tine Chelk. As the master of the Golden Servant, she was now a participant in the Holy Grail War. And yet, she'd made the contradictory declaration that she did not desire the Holy Grail. Elaborating on her true goals, she said, "We wish to drive out the Magi who have selected this place as the site of their Holy Grail War, who have run roughshod over this land. Such is the extent of our desire, Your Majesty." She declared her desire to destroy the Holy Grail War without the least hint of gravitas. The golden heroic spirit, the king summoned into this age as a servant of the archer class, disinterestedly replied, "I do not care for the Grail either. If it is the true Grail, I shall punish the knaves who stole my treasure, and if it is a false Grail, I shall execute the ingrates who have performed this ritual." "Your gracious words reassure me, Your Majesty," she thanked him. Continuing on, she spoke of her people. "For 1,000 years, my tribe has lived in harmony with the land on which Snowfield was built. We even protected it against the tyrants from the east who sought to rule this land. But then, a sect in their government joined forces with those wretched Magi, and in a mere 70 years they overran this land." Her voice was thick with a mixture of rage and sadness. But the heroic spirit did not seem to care. "What rot! It matters not which mongrel reigns supreme over this mongrel land, for it is a part of my garden, and shall in the end return to me. Ordinarily, I would not deign to interpose in a squabble among mongrels, but if they dare lay their hands on my treasures, well, that would be a different matter." As always, he thought only about himself. What did the girl make of that? She did not find it terribly unpleasant, nor was it particularly surprising. He conducted himself as a king at all times, so none could question his kingship. His indomitability inspired a twinge of something like envy in her. She composed herself and stepped out of the cave. Outside the cave, perhaps 100 people in black garments stood at attention, awaiting her return. The majority of them were brown-skinned, just like her, but there was also a few white and black-skinned people among them. They had driven a fleet of vehicles to the lip of the valley and encircled the entrance to the cave. Clearly, they were not here to do an honest day's work. They laid their eyes upon the girl and the imposing man beside her, and, in unison, they reverently knelt before the girl and the heroic spirit. "Who are these knaves?" Tine, too, knelt before him before replying, "They're but members of the society that seeks to revive our tribe and defeat the Magi that have descended upon the city, Your Majesty. I have succeeded my father as the society's representative, and so I must fight in this war." "Oh." Many people knelt before him in veneration. Perhaps it reminded him of how things had been when he was alive. His eyes faintly narrowed as he ever so slightly acknowledged her. "Mongrels though you may be, you seem to understand who is worthy of your worship. We would not dare to meet Your Majesty's splendor with anything but the deepest gratitudes. So, you wish to make use of my might for your ends. It seems you are prepared adequately for this forthcoming battle. She knew she was supposed to be honored by that comment, and yet she was uneasy. The king was clearly bored and took no pains to hide it. And right away, as if to confirm her suspicions, this heroic spirit spoke. But this Grail is, after all, a false one. The other rabble who have been drawn here are mere trifles. Deliver judgment unto them as I may, I shall find no respite from this tedium in doing so. By the time he had finished speaking, he had brought forth a small bottle. Everyone who was there to witness it would fondly reminisce about it later. And what was it? It was a distortion of space from which emerged a single carafe that fell right into the heroic spirit's hands. It was a beautifully adorned vessel made of who knows what. Perhaps china, or perhaps crystal. Either way, it was lustrous and translucent. Some sort of liquid washed about inside it. If this war will be a mere trifle to me, it is only fitting I treat it accordingly. As a childish game, there will be no need for me to use the full force of my powers. Until an enemy worthy of my power comes forth, I shall spend my time in leisure. As he trailed off, he unsealed the vessel and was about to down it in one go until— wait, that's what turns him into Kid Gil. Right then, with a timing so perfect, it must have been brought about by the machinations of fate, rather than chance. The earth cried out. I don't know what noise that is. Is that music? Am I supposed to read it like ooh, 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 ooh. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Tina and her followers all turned to the sky. They'd heard a mighty roar off in the distance, one with the power to shake both heaven and earth. But it was too beautiful to be called a roar. It was as though a giant angel or its ilk, or perhaps even the earth itself, was singing a lullaby. Oh shoot, wait, hold up. Okay, no, I actually might have been right. They could tell that the sound had come from far, far away, from the forests that lay to the west of Snowfield. That tremendous rumbling noise, which laid waste to the very laws of physics, was, for some reason, something Tina had faith in. It was like the first cry of a newborn, and at the same time, it was almost certainly the voice of a stupendously powerful servant. Archer, too, stood motionless upon hearing that voice. The bottle he had conjured was at his lips. He had been about to drink, but when he stopped, it was then that the Golden King displayed a powerful emotion for the first time. Even those who had known Archer for some time would say it was rare to see him so emotional. That king among all kings was quick to anger, but by no means level-headed. But to think that even he could be brought to this state. That voice. Could it be? His eyes lit up with surprise, consternation, bewilderment, and then exhilaration. Is it you? Tina noticed that the heroic spirit's powerful aura wavered for a mere instant as he whispered those words. Without a moment's hesitation, Archer exuded arrogance once more, overbearing as always. He burst into a fit of earnest laughter. The sound of his jubilant voice penetrated the vast sky higher and even higher. Then, after he had his fill of laughter, "Ha! What fortune! What am I to call a happenstance of this sort if not proof of my kingship?" He swelled with delight and vigor, as though he had not just been bored a few moments ago. "Rejoice, mongrel girl! It seems I shall have the occasion to use full force of my abilities in this war." The King of Heroes was uncharacteristically talkative, perhaps because he was awash in joy. "What a pleasure it would have been to end it all in a duel on yonder plaza, but then again, if he had been summoned as a mad warrior, no, I shall not speak of it. This is not a matter that mongrels ought to hear of." He was in a pleasant mood, unable to stifle his laughter, as kingly as ever. As he stared in the direction from which the roar came, he spoke to Tine, who still knelt beside him. "Look upon me, Tine." Shocked that the heroic spirit would refer to her by name, Tine raised her head to look up at him. The king tossed her the bottle he was holding on to. "It is an elixir of youth. I imagine you have no need for it at your age, But now that it has come to this, I do not need it either. Be grateful. Yes, your majesty. Her eyes were open with surprise. Archer glanced at her for a moment before going on. If you wish to become my subject, I shall command you thus, he said majestically. Though he paid little attention to her, Archer was in high spirits as he delivered his kingly order. You are but a mere child. Act as one. Until you learn the ways of the world, it will suffice for you to gaze upon my kingly might with jubilance. Yo, we have art. Yo, okay. Okay. So her outfit kind of giving me mad Arkwood vibes. Just saying. Are we getting the true ancestor Chantal Brunstead becoming real? Probably not. Though there was a touch of sarcasm in his words, they were nonetheless powerful. She had discarded all her emotions for the sake of her tribe, and yet, when faced with his words, she faltered. Indeed, because she had discarded her emotions, she could do nothing but display her utmost respect to him. She was unable to jubilate, and so hung her head. I shall attempt to do so, your majesty, she said apologetically. And so, with that, one servant and his master had stepped onto the battlefield. Gilgamesh, the king of heroes, along with the girl whose land had been stolen. Oh, dang. Oh, dang. Okay, so we're gonna go one by one for this. Okay. We're kind of Pulp Fictioning it, you know? I don't know. I don't think that's what it is. What's that? What's the ones where it's like you get all the characters and then it kind of goes back together? Is that Rashomon? It might be Rashomon. Anyways, I'm really excited to keep on reading. I heard, so the one thing I have heard from a couple people is I've heard that this almost feels like more continuity porn than even what Grand Order goes through. And I'm already starting to see some of it. I'm already starting to see like all the references ever, and I'm very, very excited to continue on. So thank you all for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time as we move on to the next chapter. Maybe one, maybe two. We'll see how long they go, right? But we'll learn more about who these characters, who the servants are, because I mean, we know Archer, we know Lancer, but kind of the rest of them, we really don't. So we'll see you for that next time, guys. For some more Let's Read Fate Strange Fake. Ciao.